I get to the Dr. Pepper hotline, Dad, I'll let you bring Mike Griffith with Dawg Nation into the show.
Well, Mike Griffith is awful good. I listen to him a lot of times at a lot of different places, and he does an excellent job. Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
I'm pretty good. I'm just now getting this implication with that song, guys. Should I feel offended, or do I need to take something from that?
I don't know. James, did you mean anything by that music that you just played, bringing in Mike?
It's the first Georgia song that came to mind.
Yeah, I see how it is. You could play the nights the lights went out in Georgia, since Alabama's turned the lights out on Georgia the last 2 years, right?
Yeah, well, let me ask you this question. Well, you're in Alabama territory. Does Georgia have a killer instinct when they play, or are they playing just not to lose?
That's a good question. I think against Notre Dame, I think they might have underestimated the Notre Dame offense and ability to run the football a little bit. And so that did look like a game they were holding on. I agree with you. I thought that the game plan was somewhat, guys, I mean, I'm just going to say it. It kind of looks like old Nick Saban, Alabama, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know what's better. I mean, Alabama's ranked number 1 right now. It almost seems like by default, nobody's really looked overly impressive, maybe except for Ohio State. We got to question their competition up there. But do you like old Alabama, or you like new Alabama? You like throwing it all over the park, Alabama, and giving up 279 yards to Ole Miss on the ground, Alabama? Is that what people like there? Because that's not what's happening here. Kirby Smart is still running an offense that's trying to eat up the clock and protect his defense, and you don't see, Georgia giving up that kind of yardage. But, I also don't have Tua there to throw it all over the park for 400 and whatever yards. So I don't know. So I guess to answer your question, did you think that Nick Saban's older Alabama teams played not to lose? I thought they were just efficient. And I kind of guess that's what I'm getting at with Kirby Smart's team. They look like, eventually they're going to get – that's kind of what happened against Tennessee. I mean, the final score was 43-14.
Yeah, I think as Alabama fans, any fan, we put too much stock on stats. They're killing Alabama's defense. It's not a great Alabama defense, don't get me wrong, but I mean, they're rolling in the second and third team when they're up so big. The little bit that you've seen of Alabama, will they be able to, if they do meet Georgia in Atlanta, will that be a shootout? Will Georgia be able to score on Alabama?
I think Georgia will score on Alabama. I think anytime Georgia goes to the 2-minute, they move the ball well. I guess I just want to know who Alabama's backup quarterback is, really. I mean, I guess that's the joke, right? I mean, that's what's happened the last couple of years. But, I'll be honest, guys. I want to see more from Alabama. I want to see what happens with Alabama LSU. I mean, I'm not sold on either one. I mean, we're going to find out a little bit, I think, Saturday between LSU and Florida. I expect LSU to throttle Florida. I'm not sold on Florida at all, but I kind of want to see what happens when Alabama meets LSU. I don't think anybody's going to challenge Georgia in the East. I really don't. I think you got to go back to 2016, since an East Division team played Georgia within, single digits. So they got South Carolina Saturday, and they're at home against Kentucky, and then they're off, and then they go to Jacksonville to play Florida in a quote-unquote neutral site game, and then they play Missouri at home. So, and then they play at Auburn, which, I don't know if the clock struck midnight on Auburn or what, but they don't seem quite as daunting as they did a week or two ago.
Is the difference in Kirby's program and Mark Richt's program just simply the recruiting, not necessarily the coaching, the ability to have watched the way Alabama was organized recruiting? He took that idea over to Georgia. Is that the only difference in the two programs now that Kirby's got them versus when Mark had them?
No, guys, I think that, coaching, there's a lot of flavors, right? I mean, there's a lot of flavors of frozen yogurt out there. It's all frozen yogurt, but everybody does a little different, has a little different taste and a little different twist.
Yeah.
And I think Kirby Smart does things differently. I think a lot of what he does is similar to Nick Saban. I mean, why wouldn't it be? Saban's the guy that kind of defied, the precedent. You're not supposed to win without continuity, coaching continuity. And it didn't matter, like I said, you have Bozo the Clown as the offense coordinator there, and Saban's going to win 12 games. I mean, no offense to, whoever the offense coordinator is right now. It's like a revolving door. That's not supposed to happen. That doesn't happen anywhere else in America. And it's never happened anywhere else in America. And so, with Nick Saban, you've got quite an innovator there, and you've got quite a trendsetter. And, Kirby had the fortune to work under Nick all those years. And so when people say, oh, he's copying him, hey, he's copying the good ideas. There's enough people listening on this show right now in Tuscaloosa that I can give you a NASCAR analogy. It's just like when somebody works for a certain crew chief. He goes to another team, and he takes all those ideas and all that innovation, he puts it in the new car that he's working on, and then he tries to add a few more things. And as time goes on, he becomes a little bit more of his own guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happened with Kirby a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking with Mike Griffith with Dawg Nation. As far as Alabama goes, I hear people complaining because they score too fast. Mike, I would think you'd want to score every time you get. If I could score on every play, I would score on every play. Everybody says, well, you're going to wear your defense out. Well, if I keep scoring like that, I'm going to be so far ahead. I'll play my second and third string guys. I'm not going to worry about giving up 20 to 25 points. Is it bad to score too fast, Mike?
Well, that's a loaded question because the College Football Playoff Committee has shown us that they do like offense and that they're willing to ignore terrible defense. Oklahoma, for example, was not the fourth best team in the country last year. They had a defense that ranked 109th in the nation, and they gave up 28 points to Alabama in 17 minutes. But people were infatuated with that Oklahoma offense, and that makes Lincoln Riley a good coach. Never mind how horrible his defenses are. Now, some people would tell you defense wins championships, and I gotta tread lightly here because I know my market, and I was there in that town when Gene Stallings put together what I thought was maybe one of the greatest college defenses of all time in 1992, Wimp.
Yeah.
And so Alabama won with defense for a long time. So, I say be careful what you wish for because all that offense last year, and you guys know I was the biggest proponent. I did everything but bring out the pom-poms, talking about how great that Alabama offense was, beating every opponent by 23 points or more. Hadn't happened in the 19th century, much less this millennium, and it was the most dominant team in SEC history. And what did that get you in January? So before I say that it's a good thing or a bad thing, you got to look at it from a historical perspective. Now, teams with great offenses, they have won championships before, but I think balance is key. And there's one other thing to consider here about scoring too fast. I'd also say playing too fast. Now, I haven't looked at Alabama's pace to play lately, but you don't want to run too many plays. I'll go back to 2016 Tennessee, which Jones set a single-season offense record at Tennessee. Had the player of the year, Josh Dobbs. They handed it to Jalen Hurts because everybody liked him at Alabama. You know how that goes. You get all them awards there because you win so many games. But that was the best offense in the SEC that year. But he lost half his team halfway through the season to injury because Tennessee was playing 90 snaps a game instead of 60 snaps a game. And when you play more snaps, you got a higher opportunity of getting injured. So as long as pace of play stays slow, I don't think it'll have that wear-down effect like maybe some of these teams like Missouri that want to run 80 or 90 slaps a game. But I do think there's something to be said for putting your defense on the field too quickly, even as they develop depth, which I do recognize Alabama's doing with all those young players playing.
Yeah, Mike, when the committee comes out with their top 25, I guess, for the playoff, hopefully they won't factor in last year because to me, there's no way Clemson should be. I know they're in the number 2 in the poll right now, but if you look at what they've done, for North Carolina to have a play to beat them, I think Georgia should be ahead of them, Oklahoma should be ahead of them, Ohio State should be ahead of them, and Alabama should be ahead of them. I want to get your take on that.
Wow. That's tough because there is something to be said for winning games. Again, I'll go back to 92 Bama. They weren't blowing anybody out. There's a lot of people that said, oh, look at this, they're only beating this team 14-10. Well, if you watch that game, there was no way that team was going to win. And I get your point about North Carolina playing Clemson close. But winning games is tough, man. And you do get everybody's best shot. You do get some twists. And there was a Hall of Fame coach on the other sideline in Mac Brown. And North Carolina is not a horrible team. I mean, you saw what they came back and beat South Carolina earlier this year, so it's not like they're just dog meat. They don't look like a 1 or a 2-win team. I mean, they're at least a 500 team, I would think. And it was in their stadium, and it was, one of those given Saturdays. So as far as last year mattering, I don't want to say the pot calling the kettle black here, but should Alabama got in the 2017 playoff without winning their league or even playing in their league championship game? Did Did they maybe get a nod because of what they've done in 2016 and the reputation that Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide has built? I think they probably did. So if you believe that Alabama belonged in the 2017 playoff, and they proved that they did by winning the championship in the end, they proved they were one of the 4 best, then I think you got to give Clemson the benefit of the doubt.
Well, I agree with you. Winning matters, but the teams that I named are all undefeated. So then you got to look at how they're winning, how they're playing. I would just not put those guys ahead of Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma. I don't know, maybe even Wisconsin at this point. But it'll play itself out eventually.
Who's Ohio State? Here's the thing about Ohio State. And I covered the Big Ten for 4 years. That was a good little hiatus. That's like a studying abroad in college or something, going back up there for 4 years. Who does Ohio State beat? Who are we impressed by? I mean, Michigan State.
It's not about necessarily who they beat; it's how they're beating them. I mean, they are destroying them, Mike. Whoever they play.
The Big Ten.
Yeah, but they're destroying.
Oklahoma's in the Big 12. They're the Big 12. It's the Big 10. I think if you put, I'll say this. I think if you put Ole Miss in the Big 10, I think they're a 500 team.
Really?
I think Arkansas might win a couple games in the Big 10.
Come on.
I mean, it's a great basketball league, but from a football standpoint, I just year in and year out, I don't think it has the depth. And if you look at the NFL draft numbers, they would reflect that the Big Ten is the second best league, but they're still far off of that, SEC. I'm trying to remember, what was it, 64, 65 guys from the SEC drafted, and then I think maybe the next conference might have had 27 or 29, something like. There's just such a disparity of talent depth, and Ohio State runs an offense that's, again, geared towards scoring points. But what's going to happen when they play a real defense?
But Mike, they beat Cincinnati 42-0. Cincinnati's decent. 42-0. They beat Nebraska 48-7. They beat Michigan State 34-10. I mean, these guys have played pretty well now, Ohio State.
They played pretty well, but you know what? If they lined up and played Clemson tomorrow, I'm not sure who I'd take. I'm really not. Yeah. I think that'd be a good football game. And let's just be honest. What's happened with Clemson is Trevor Lawrence isn't looking like the guy he looked like in January. Now, I spent a whole summer, taking it pretty hard from these Clemson fans. And I think a lot of Trevor Lawrence. He was a freshman of the year. I selected him for that award, the Sean Alexander Freshman of the Year award. Sean and I picked him before he even beat all that. So we think a lot of Trevor. And I went to the spring game in Clemson. He looked outstanding. I'm not sure what's happened to Trevor Lawrence this year, but he's not the Trevor Lawrence that we saw in January. Now, I don't know if it's, if it has to do because he got all these muscles and bulked up and he kind of lost his touch. I kind of wonder how basketball guys don't lose their shot and all that. You guys probably know about that. But he just doesn't look like the same guy throwing the football in terms of his accuracy and his timing. And I get what your point is. Are we going to judge? If we're going to judge them based on, let's make sure we get Wake Forest in the top 10 because they're 5-0 too, and they beat North Carolina worse than Clemson did. If we're going to play those transitive properties games.
Yeah, good point.
And you're doing a great job. Georgia has run off and left everybody in the East, and has ruined the East. You can say Florida's going to nitpick and get a player or two, but there's nobody. The East is ruined. Georgia's ruined the East.
Ruined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nobody to compete against them.
East is. I mean, I don't think this year. It's not as much what Georgia's done. They haven't even gotten some of these guys yet. But you look at, you're playing South Carolina. Their quarterback Jake Bentley. He's gone. He's out for the year. Then you play Kentucky. They lost their quarterback early, right?
Yeah.
Florida's already on their second quarterback. Every time I look up, Kelly Bryant's dragging himself off the field at Missouri. And then you got Auburn, and they just lost their best running back.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Now, Auburn's not an East team. A lot of people think they ought to be to maybe even these divisions out a little bit. But and then you got, after Auburn, I think you got A&M. And I guess we're going to find out more about A&M this Saturday when they play Alabama. Doesn't Alabama go down there to College Station?
They do.
Wow, I bet that's the Gene Stallings game right there. I hope he's there for the coin flip.
No, he's going to the Oklahoma-Texas game.
What?
Yep.
What?
How does that happen?
I don't know, but that's where he's going.
Huh. There you
go.
That's
Gene Dogs is going to be at Oklahoma, Texas, instead of
It's going to be an Oklahoma, Texas game.
That's a
Put that on
slap.
your-
You know what?
Is that a slap in the face to A&M and Alabama?
No, let me tell you what it is, guys. Let me tell
He
you what
didn't
it is.
know who to root for.
Yeah.
No, Gene probably heard Jackie Sherrill was going to be there.
Yeah, he may
So he
have.
said
He
if
may have.
there,
He may have heard
he
Bill
can-
Oliver was going to be there.
he ain't going to share a stadium with Jackie Sherrill. That
No.
stadium ain't big enough for Gene and Jackie. Those days, guys. Do you remember those days, Gene
Oh,
and
yeah.
Jackie days? Those guys, they go out like cats and dogs on them Saturdays.
Hey,
I still think Alabama flooded the field that one year that Jackie called out Alabama and said he didn't think Alabama was a tough football team, and we went back and told Gene what Jackie said. And Saturday we show up and the sprinklers had miraculously been on all night, and it was a daggone mud pit. I think Gene did that on purpose just to get into that slugfest with the Bulldogs that year.
He slowed the field down, huh? Mike, when does that contract end with Georgia and Florida playing in Jacksonville? Will that game eventually go to the home site?
Yeah, it should. I mean, 2021. You look at, I'll tell you, all you got to do is look at Alabama and Auburn.
Yeah.
You know, and the time was, and I know that most of the people, you know, he's such a great audience there in Tuscaloosa. Everybody knows football, like the Bible verse is there. They all know that Alabama and Auburn used to play in Birmingham at one time at Legion Field. But I don't know if they just kind of stepped back from 10,000 feet. When I covered Alabama, Bryant Denny, I mean, you look out over the campus, it was 73,000. And Alabama played all the big games in Birmingham. Now you move it to Tuscaloosa, and holy cow, now we're talking about 100,000. And Tuscaloosa, boom. And, you know, why in the world would you ever give up the Auburn-Alabama game? I think what happened was Alabama saw when Auburn started getting that game, you know, what Auburn was able to parlay that into on game day. And then Alabama started doing it. And you don't hear anybody in Alabama tell Auburn, I wish we'd go back to Legion Field. You don't hear anybody saying that. Now, this is a little different because there's, you know, beaches and, you know, some of the rich boosters like to vacation that week and such. But you're giving up one out of your 8 recruiting weekends. And every time I get in an argument, I just use Alabama as an example to these Georgia people. I said, okay, you think this is a good idea? I'll tell you what. You think Nick Saban would play LSU in New Orleans every year so the Bama fans could go to Bourbon Street and have a good time?
Good point.
No chance.
No chance. Dad, anything else from Mike?
No,
before we
I
let him
appreciate
go?
it. You did a great job. We always enjoy having you on. Thank you.
Go Buckeyes. Go Buckeyes, Mike. Go Buckeyes.
All right, I hear you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks. Great job.